I'm gonna hit broadcast.
Well, hello everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to this AABDC session on returning to a better workplace. My name is Ben Pring. I am the head of thought leadership at Cognizant, which is a big technology services and consulting company, and the director of a group we call the Center for the Future of Work. And this session is around reimagining the future of work. And I'd like to thank John Wang for inviting me to host the session today, where we're going to be talking about, obviously, what is a very challenging moment for us all at the moment, dealing with multiple crises, multiple challenges, trying to keep the wheels turning, trying to keep business going, and facing a lot of headwinds, a lot of issues that we've all got to work through. And we're going to spend this session today, which is the first of a series of webinars, the second and third of which will be next Wednesday and the following Wednesday, really trying to dig in a little bit to what a number of senior leaders, large organizations represented on this panel and other panels during this series are trying to do to ensure we can get through this in good shape. I'm joined by some great folks today who are going to share some of their thoughts, experiences that they're going through in their organizations. And I'm going to ask them just to briefly introduce themselves. And then I'm going to come back and just spend a few minutes kind of framing what we're going to be talking about in a little bit more detail. And then we'll get into some discussion amongst the panel, and then I'd very much like to invite everybody listening in right now to throw in your questions and your thoughts and observations, and we'll try and get through as many of those as we can in the hour that we're all together. So firstly, let me just go one by one through the three panelists and ask them briefly to state name, rank, serial number, perhaps where they're sitting, how they're feeling, and then we'll get into some discussion. And first, it's Joyty Chopra from MGM. Joyty.
Thank you very much, Benjamin, and hello, everyone. Greetings from Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm the Chief People, Inclusion, and Sustainability Officer. I'd like to certainly give a shout out to any of my MGM colleagues who may have patched in from the Social Impact Sustainability team or our Employee Network resource groups. It's terrific to be here. I've been an inclusion and sustainability and human capital leader for many, many years. I thought I'd seen a lot during my career and tenure, but nothing has prepared me, or many of you, I'm sure, with what we have encountered over the period of the last 6 months. At MGM, we have a workforce, we had a workforce of over 80,000 people. The majority of whom were furloughed starting in March. We shut down operations in 29 locations, literally in a matter of days. So we have certainly had to reimagine the future of work in ways that we could never have imagined. So looking forward to sharing what we've learned, our practices, what we've observed, and how we have continued to try to help others on the path to sustainability during this period. And so I just want to close by saying a very special shout out to John Wang and the team at the Asian American Business Development Center for their thought leadership in orchestrating this series.
Great, thank you, Joyty. Next, Maria Alshami from IBM. Maria.
Thank you, Ben. And I'm Maria Alshami, a lead account partner for IBM in the telecommunications, media, and entertainment industry. I am a passionate advocate of diversity and inclusion, and thank you, John, for inviting me to participate. One of my main focus is advancing women in leadership, and I am truly honored to share with Ben, Jyoti, and Jim this panel today, such a distinguished set of professionals, and I'm here to share my experience from a global company perspective and my own personal experience. I never thought we could continue to do the business that we do in a pandemic like this. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. And last but by no means least, Jim Lee from PepsiCo. Jim.
Hey, how's everyone doing? So I'm Jim. I've been with PepsiCo for 22 years. I lead strategy and transformation for the PepsiCo Beverages North America team. So the types of things you'll see: Pepsi, Gatorade, bottled Frappuccino, Rockstar, those types of brands, Tropicana as well. And I would echo what my colleagues have said. I mean, obviously we're in some unprecedented times. Clearly, I think Joyty, the impact in your industry is massive, certainly massive. And ours has been interesting. It's been up and down, the impacts on various industries and where you sit. I'll just leave you with this, or start with this thought, is just, all the experts you see around the world that write great business articles about how you should operate more efficiently or do business better, all that's flipped on its head, right? So for many, many years, everyone talked about just in time, reduce inventories, reduce costs and efficiency. Well, I think those people are sort of wrong in these situations, right? So I think this demand to be more agile as we move forward in any industry, and the flexibility we need to drive is not only just for us as an industry, but for leaders and people, is to think about that. Because I think those are one of the things hopefully everyone takes away from all this crisis and all the challenges we're facing is agility and flexibility. And I always encourage that with my teams is work on that, because that applies to people and industries. So I'm happy to be a part of this. Thank you, Benjamin, Jonathan, and John Wang and AABDC. I think this is a great panel. I'm looking forward to it.
Great, thank you, Jim. Thanks for those introductory comments, everybody. No, I think that's super interesting. And I think if I just spend a couple of moments reflecting on some of our observations from the Center for the Future of Work, a group that we've been running for about 10 years now in Cognizant, thinking about how sort of new technology is changing our world, changing our lives, changing the work we all do. And particularly how this moment of challenge and stress is acting as an accelerant of a lot of the underlying trends that Jim, you just touched on and we've been seeing as well, have brought things perhaps on the edge of some people's radars, really into the sort of bang in the middle of the radar. And I just frame our conversation around three sort of key themes, I think. One is that I personally feel this is probably the biggest moment of challenge, the biggest existential moment of challenge anybody attending this session today has ever faced in their career. I think this is a very, very significant moment, probably the biggest moment probably since the Second World War. We've just celebrated the 75th anniversary of the ending of the war in Japan. I mean, this is very, very, very big deal, and I don't think we should overlook that or forget that or sort of try and skate past this. This is a very, very significant moment which is questioning a lot of the underlying fundamental tenets of how we operate, what we're trying to do, what the purpose of what we're trying to do is. And I think as much as there's a temptation and a real pressing need to get back to some sort of normality, I don't think we should rush just to literally go back to the way we were doing things before. I think this is a moment in which we can look afresh, look again at things that were working and things that weren't working, and try, as John has framed this, to go back not to just the old world, but to try and build a better world for more and more people. So that's an existential moment in a nutshell, if you like. The second theme is clearly one that's close to many of our hearts, certainly Jim and I'm sure Maria and Joyty as well, is this whole increasing exponential wave of technology and digitalization that's been coming into our lives, certainly again for a long time, but in a way, something I think that we've only really scratched the surface of. If you think about the information revolution, the first commercial computers just celebrated its 73rd birthday. And we have a sense in a way, because all of us have worked in the sort of information age, digital age, that we sort of understand this. We sort of got the memo, we sort of know what's happening. I would put it in a different context, that if you look at history and the big waves of change in history, the previous industrial revolutions, they lasted for 100 years, 150 years. We may only be halfway through this revolution. We may only be a third of the way through this revolution. And if you think about the way we use technology, clearly very central, we wouldn't be meeting like this today without it. But in reality, if you peel back a little bit, technology is still quite tangential, quite immaterial in many aspects of the way that businesses operate, society operates, healthcare operates, etc., etc., etc. And I think going forward, this acceleration of digitization into healthcare, education, work is very, very significant. And again, I think in terms of the opportunity, it's an opportunity to make things cheaper, to make things better, to make things more efficient, to make things more human, paradoxically. And again, in the theme of building a better world, presents a tremendous amount of opportunities if we can frame them in the right way and think about how to leverage the upside and minimize the downside. So that's the second framing thought. And then the third, and really comes full circle back to this notion of building a better world. I mean, in this reset, where we have this opportunity, enforced, obviously, but an opportunity to look afresh at things again, it's very, very obvious that a lot of aspects of our society, of societies around the world, have really kind of gone off the rails a little bit. The notion of this winner-takes-all economy that we've built, where technology is very central to that, this platform-based economic model that we're living in for many of us at the moment, creating tremendous wealth, tremendous opportunity for seemingly a smaller and smaller number of people. This is something that we do really have to look at very, very carefully and with a very cold critique of whether we can continue to go down this route. And I'm sure many of you are reading and involved in your own organizations in this discussion around the transition from shareholder capitalism, as it's called, into stakeholder capitalism. And there are many very senior figures around business here in the US, other parts of the world, who are aligning themselves with this need to kind of reset capitalism, to re-look at it, to ensure that underserved, underprivileged, underrepresented people can enjoy the benefit of this incredible technology that we all love, but that we can see does have a very real downside. And so in this moment of reset, in this moment of challenge, this is the opportunity, I think, that we all have, and this is the opportunity that John is clearly trying to set up in this series of events, is to think about spreading opportunity, spreading wealth, spreading education, spreading the means of production, technology-based means of production into the hands of more and more people, so more and more people can participate and benefit. And again, I think in another generation or two's time, and when we look back at what's going on now, and we look at the history of what we're doing right now, we'll see this as a very significant pivot moment, a very significant hinge moment in which the decisions that we make, leaders like you make at the moment in the organizations, in the communities you all represent, are going to be decisions that really set the trajectory, hopefully in a positive direction, for decades to come, for generations to come. And so that's why I think this is a significant moment. I think it's why it's a great moment for us all to come together. It's why I'm thrilled to be here with the panelists today. So let me pause there, and I'll sort of, with that framing in mind, let me go to the panelists and perhaps reflect on those thoughts a little bit. Also, perhaps reflect a little bit on how you personally, your organizations that you represent, are thinking about these kind of broad macro themes, the opportunity, the challenge. Perhaps let's start at a kind of strategic level, and then we'll get a little bit more into the weeds and the tactics and the nitty-gritty of what this reopening phase looks like for you all. So, Joyty, over to you. How do you think about that?
Yeah, so thank you, Benjamin, for that context setting. And I would wholeheartedly agree with you on sort of the three themes you've laid out and characterizing this as an existential moment. I mean, never in history have we had a time like this where every nation in the world, every economy, every industry and sector has been completely disrupted by the onset of this pandemic and have had to sort of hit the reset button on so many levels. And it is a defining moment. And I think it will define those companies and institutions and organizations that endure and that have the resiliency to adapt, to change their business models, to redefine, to recalibrate, to rethink. And it's across all dimensions in an organizational construct. It's your people, it's your platforms, it's your supply chain, it's your customers, it's your vendors, your service providers, your partners, your investors, your shareholders, the list of stakeholders goes on. And so thinking about how you manage that in this new era, I think is going to be very significant. So I think the theme of resiliency and what that means for each of you at an individual level, and then for the companies and organizations that you work for at a sort of institutional level is important. And so I think there's a lot more yet to unfold. I think these first 6 months have certainly taught us a lot. You know, and as we get further into the discussion, share sort of some of the personal insights and learnings and experiences that we've had at MGM. But I think that there's still a lot more to unfold and a lot more that we've got to yet learn and respond to. So Maria and Jim, over to you.
Yeah, no, Maria, do you want to pick up there? Thank you.
Thank you. So, Jyoti, you're right about it. And when you mention it, it's not just about the technology, right? So we witnessed the acceleration of digitization in the last 5 months, like Jim said, and everyone had to jump and be agile, and everyone came together. But what I am seeing and witnessing is a humanization and a high acceptance of people being in a home with their pets and their kids. And that's unprecedented in my experience. I never saw that so much acceptance, right? So much reach out, which is humanizing the corporate world in a way that, to me, when we look back, it's going to be a significant impact for the greater good, right? So I see a little bit of the globalization that was so much top of mind strategically, a little bit reversing given the limitations of travel. So I'm looking at that, and I will invite others to provide some more input on that. Would it mean a reversed, and do we know how much it will reverse, or is it temporary? I don't think we know the answer. I do believe that we need to be agile in decision making, agile in not only adopting, transforming, but bringing the workforce and the people aspects along. Because unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of, I'll say, underprivileged people impacted in a way that is very sad. So I'm kind of in the middle of this world of technology and advancement, working for a global company. We are keeping business continuity, 100% service delivery on. And at the same time, so much sorrow, losses. And so it's kind of a big moment. For me, that's how I am seeing it. A little bit of a time to regroup internally, try to look at your business strategy, operating model, how fast can we go? But what about the people? So that's kind of what I'm thinking, Jim.
Thank you, Maria.
Yeah.
No, Jim, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I'll build upon that. I think, it's such an interesting moment of time. I mean, it's funny just reflecting on just how much dramatically has changed. I mean, just 7 months ago, I mean, we're sitting in offices. I mean, maybe we're slightly behind. We're fiddling around with projector screens, trying to figure out how to get it to turn on and focus properly. We were using Skype video. It never worked. thankfully we switched to Zoom right before. I mean, like, it's just imagine just the amount of technology we've adopted. I mean, if this happened 2 years ago, where would we be? We wouldn't have the technology or the bandwidth potentially to do what we're doing today. So it's an interesting time of when it's happened. Technology is impacting us in so many different ways. I mean, obviously a lot of arguments about the polarization of the country today. It doesn't matter what side you sit on. A lot of the polarization is being amplified by technology, social media technology, all those types of things. And so we're definitely I think we're going to emerge out of this wondering what were we doing in 2019? Like, how did we possibly live back then? So I think there's going to be a lot of ongoing behavioral shifts. I'm not sure, to Maria's point, I'm not sure exactly where. In our industries, thankfully a little more shielded because people can continue to purchase beverages and snacks. So we're adapting to the changing lifestyles of people. People getting more adapted to e-commerce, delivery at home. We don't know if that'll continue. I mean, honestly, like, there's no crystal ball that says when things emerge, if there's a vaccine, will people flood back to never want to touch e-commerce again because it was such a bad experience that you just want to get out to the stores? I mean, who knows? And what I do know is that you have to be agile and just be ready for different scenarios that are happening. But I can tell you the one change I know for sure, because the theme is getting back to work, is getting back to work is going to be completely different. How we leverage technology, we're going to demand it. It's not, again, maybe I'm just speaking for us. We're no longer going to accept having a room that's not wired that's wired with a projector screen that never works or something like that. You're going to demand a lot more in every single thing we do. I think social distancing, well, we hope doesn't keep happening, like, because of the crisis. People will be more aware of it, regardless if it's COVID or the flu or anything else. I think there's just going to be a different lens to that. Flexibility, people are going to have flexibility, and I can tell you, at least in our company, by and large, the impact from a headquarters standpoint has been very positive. From a work-life balance, far less time commuting, actually more time working, incredibly, because people have more.
That's a good point. Let's pick up on that, because I think you've all raised the issue, the sort of people issue. At the end of the day, this is a kind of people challenge. Let's go back round on that one more time. I mean, how do you feel your groups, your teams, the corporation is holding up? And there's been a lot of discussion about how, as you said, Jim, productivity surprisingly held up pretty well in the first few months, and now perhaps there's a little bit of fatigue kicking in. Joyty, how are you guys doing? How are your people feeling?
So similar to Jim, we were pretty much 100% at the office. We're in the service industry, so I represent the hospitality, entertainment, gaming, and retail industry at MGM Resorts. And both our corporate functions and obviously at our properties and hotels and resorts, we were always on site. So we've gone from that model to majority of our corporate functions being 100% remote. So it's a big pivot and shift when you've been used to going into a corporate office and you're 100% now remote. So I think having connectivity, having communication flows. I mean, one of the things that I did with our social impact sustainability team was quickly institute daily check-ins. We're now meeting twice a week, and we moved to video conferencing almost immediately so that you have that sort of virtual connectivity with your team members. So now the whole company's on Microsoft Teams, and we've sort of instituted that. But on property, we're still in person. And so I'll come to the health and safety piece a little bit later in the conversation, and some of the dramatic shifts we had to institute around health and safety. But I think the other thing we mustn't lose sight of from the people perspective is the need for empathy and compassion at a time like this more than ever before, because it's not just about work. I mean, there's been a whole blending of work and family and life integration at levels we haven't seen before, whether it's schooling or whether it's personal life or family life plus work life. It is now completely integrated. And helping colleagues and employees respond to that, cope to that, adapt to that is really important. And I think, one of the things at MGM we've been really looking at and talking about is what are some of the mental health implications around this? How can we be more supportive to our workforce and provide additional resources to help them cope during this time? So,
yeah. Maria, you touched on that as well, this sort of blending of work and life. It's this sort of very interesting period, and we're all seeing inside each other's homes and private spaces, except for Jim, who's got the corporate logo there. Obviously, IBM, a huge multinational all around the world, people working remotely for a long period of time. But I think, similarly to here at Cognizant, I think it is a very different experience where literally we're all kind of in this informal environment now.
Yeah. And, generally, I'll say it must be a people priority issue because it's about safety, right? So, in our world, it's not only about the well-being of you being able to be healthy and attend a meeting, but it's the mental health that Jyoti mentioned, right? It is a lot of needs that are developing in the home when schools are not opening and your office might be opening. So now, what we are seeing is that, especially at IBM, we are seeing a lot of subsidized programs for elderly care, for children's care. So companies are very quickly making decisions that are to enable either a quick return to work or to actually take good care of us. A lot of mental health, a lot of programs, a lot of support. But also a very important priority for us is taking care of our clients. And with the 100% of digital availability, which to me it was good to say that we had it, but to see it in a day or two after COVID hitting hard was to me one of my biggest professional, being a technologist, moment of pride. And Jim, you are laughing. Transformation was in the agenda for 5 years, and we couldn't get anyone to really care to do it. An MVP, a POC, all of that is gone. It has to get done. And so it has to get done tomorrow and immediately. So that acceleration to allow business continuity, to increase productivity, we saw it all in 48 hours. So, that's kind of my thing. But seeing that the company is prioritizing the safety and well-being of our employees and our clients' environments was to me one of my biggest moments of pride. So that's my...
Yeah, no, thank you. And Jim, coming just one more time back to the people side of this, obviously a lot of your people, like Joyty's people, don't, have the luxury, I suppose, of literally just working in their houses the whole time. They've got to be on the road. They've got to be, moving the inventory, moving the goods. Again, how do you think about that? And that you touched on it, this sort of divide in a way between the kind of white collar worker traditionally, as we might classify them, and somebody who's kind of working a different experience. How are you guys thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, first, obviously for most of our workforce, they're frontline, manufacturing the product, delivering the product, merchandising, selling the product. So, by default, they have to be on location. So, I mean, as we went through this, number one priority was safety. I mean, I'm sure many companies, the amount of efforts and the people involved to try to get all the PPE to all of our employees, hazard pay, all these bonuses, leave. I mean, we're trying to provide all the flexibility in the world, because part of the challenge is to create a program that fits one size fits all is very, very challenging. And again, touches upon the flexibility part of this thing. I'm reflecting both on what Maria and Jyoti said. I think about just the human element and the empathy behind that. It's so critical at every level of the organization. So you can make a broad statement about how we should treat people, but everyone's in a different position. Everyone's got, everyone's in a personally different state. Children, so I have 3 middle, tweens or little ones, and they're demanding my attention. I also have 2 in-laws who are in their 80s, and so I got to be very careful of what I do, and they're at high at risk. Everyone's got a different situation, and so to demand that at each individual level, and not just cluster everyone to say, hey, these hundreds of people will be okay with this. We have to be very individual and human about this, and I think that one thing I'm proud of. I'm sure my panelists are proud of is probably how our company, the leadership is so critical to make the right decisions, to put the right principles in place, and lead with empathy through this whole thing is what's bringing us along. And some companies that were not able to do that, I think are going to be the ones that lose a lot of people. I mean, if you're not demonstrating that empathy and really living it. So, I mean, hopefully we've delivered as much as we could in that, but we've always done better. But I think that's the biggest part, regardless if you're frontline or headquarters.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I can just build on Jim's point and sort of share an example of something that we did at MGM. You know, when the pandemic hit us in March, and it became evident the scope and scale and seriousness of that situation, our management and leadership team made a decision to shut down MGM and all our properties. But our first priority was our employees and looking at how could we help them in this period of time. And given the size of our workforce and the number that we were furloughing, we have an MGM Resorts Foundation, and as part of that, we had an employee emergency grant fund. Typically in an annual year, this grant fund is activated, helps 200 to 300 people. We typically disperse about $500,000 in the form of emergency grants to people. But we decided to open this up as a result of the pandemic to help our colleagues who are in need and their immediate families. And essentially the fund provides payment of bills like rent, mortgage, utilities, medical assistance, funeral expenses, and so on. And we opened it up for existing employees, furloughed employees, separated employees. And we went out and our CEO led the way in terms of actively fundraising to raise dollars for our fund. And I'm incredibly proud of our team. We had a small philanthropy team. We pulled in many volunteers from our extended sustainability team from other parts of the company to help with the processing of the volume of grant applications we began receiving, which was in the thousands. And we didn't have an operation scale to disperse thousands of payments in a short period of time. But in this period of time, we have helped thousands of employees. We have pushed out more than $13 million in less than 6 months in the form of emergency assistance payments to people. And so I share this story to say that, you know, you sometimes have to act in the moment. You have to get behind something. You look at what you currently have. How can you scale it? How can you extend it? We had to work with our legal team on sort of some of the paperwork, but we pushed it through, and hopefully it's made a difference in the lives of many, many more of our employees in a period of time. And so sometimes thinking outside of the box and just working with resources that you have and thinking about scaling them in just a different way can be the way to go.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. So let's change tack a little bit. And before I ask this question, just a programming note for anybody listening in. If you'd like to ask a question, there's a Q&A box on the Zoom page here. You can see, please type in your question and we'll try and get to as many of those as we go through the session as we can. Thank you for those. So let's think about this next phase, the return to the office phase, the return to the physical space that we were in before. What sort of prep work, perhaps more than prep work now, what sort of work are you guys involved in, engaged in, to be able to go safely back to the physical space? How are you thinking about that? What is that physical space for you all going to be like? How different is it going to be like? And then again, within that sort of broad context, what aspects of that old workplace that we're kind of now thinking perhaps are no longer fit for purpose can we leave behind? What are we going to see that's left behind from that, sort of removed from that equation as we venture out from our caves and go back to the real world? Maria, do you want to jump in on that one first?
Yes, thank you, Ben. So we're following a multifaceted approach to going back to work. The very complex factors are being analyzed. We own tons of artificial intelligence artifacts and tools that are helping us analyze the situation, not only for us as a global organization, but for our clients. So we are seeing a high level of education of the workforce. And so everyone understands what is the plan, fully communicated from the CEO all the way down continuously. we have a crisis management team that is involved on managing and looking at all the risk associated, right? With buildings versus suburban locations and, all the typical business planning. And so all of that is being done. We are deep into giving the flexibility, right, and the option, and also following a little bit of clients' readiness as we are a serving organization. So if the client is ready and the policy is allowed, then it's being evaluated. So that's one aspect of it. One of the things that we are doing to make it more attractive, and I think we mentioned this before, is supporting executives to be able to have the right help at home if they're going to have to leave the home and they have their children getting education, they need supervision. Also, another one is the use of all the technologies that are going to allow the design of that new space being put in place. The predictive use of too many people versus health factors that you can measure, actually temperatures, and combine all of that information in very visual dashboards. So that's available. That is there. We are using it. Clients are using it. But I don't think we know when the end it is, right? And I don't know about you, or if you want to jump in and say anything else about it, but we are prioritizing the employees, the clients, right, and the readiness around both of it.
Yeah. Jim, how about from PepsiCo?
Yeah, I think we are. It was interesting because right before all this happened, we were very much on the road to, what was viewed again as like advanced open office space, which is like putting many people around a table, and putting them in tight areas. Obviously, that's sort of gone out the window, and again, that's the need to be flexible. The way we're thinking about like headquarter types of offices around the world is we're getting a lot of feedback. And I mean, we're probably not as technologically advanced as IBM from getting all the AI, but we're leveraging a lot of learnings that we have and feedback to have sessions. So, and it's owned from the top. Our CEO is heavily engaged in workshops and discussions. In fact, I'm on a panel with him next week, specifically on returning back to work and how we should return back to work. So it's work in progress, but I think the most important thing is we're taking back feedback from our employees and trying to make sure it's as practical and as open and engaging as possible. And I know a solution is that, especially in these types of office level jobs, this location no longer becomes such a priority. I mean, you can access a broader talent pool. You can give people a lot more flexibility these days. And it's proven that you can do a very effective job. And think about the norms that were there before. When you had people in an office and someone was, dialing in or someone was remote, there was sort of this always back of your mind thinking, well, they're maybe not as effective as they should be because they're, offsite, always calling in. Now with technology, it's like, that's completely been thrown out the window. It's like, we've proven that you can have people just as effective, if not more, or remote dialing in. So location becomes a variable that no longer is such a restriction. So I think that's in our mind as well. So it's not like we're going to send everyone back one for one. You're probably send back some people, offer flexibility, and also bring in people from other locations as well.
Yeah, so that really raises this issue of the role of the office, the role of the physical workplace going forward. And as you rightly say, there's, for some people, there's been a synonym that working at home is really shirking at home. And that's kind of been blown up. And as somebody who's worked remotely for 25 years, I've never bought that logic. Joyty, how are you guys thinking about the role of the kind of head office role going forward? I mean, a lot of organizations I'm speaking with and working with at the moment are thinking we don't need as much physical office space as we had in the past. Our productivity has held up. Senior leaders' personal productivity has held up. They find, not being on the road so much, the wear and tear on them has gone down. They're kind of enjoying aspects of this experience in a way. How are you guys thinking about that? Is the physical footprint the same in the future? Is it different? Is it shrunk? Does it look different when you go back into that environment?
It's changed considerably, and I'll sort of address it on two levels. We have many employees who are corporate employees that work on properties. So if a hotel like the Beverages is open, we have food and beverage teams, we have other colleagues in corporate functions who actually sit on site at the properties, and that's continuing. But then we have other functions like IT, human resources, my area, which were housed in corporate office parks. And those are pretty much vacant with people going in on an as-needed basis. What we did at MGM, and this was one of the first areas we addressed as we began to think about reopening, was we had a cross-functional team that developed a 7-point health and safety plan that really laid out a whole set of guidelines around physical safety, well-being. We made sure that we had training in place as we brought employees back to train them on the new health and safety protocols for themselves and for one another and working together, but also for our guests. But the physical space has changed. So for example, if you walk through the casino floor in all of our properties, we have hand washing stations in the middle of the floors. At our gaming tables, we have plexiglass installations that provide appropriate seating and barriers between players, but also between the players and the dealers, as an example. Elevators, we've got restrictions on how many people in the elevators. Table occupancy at restaurants and dining facilities has changed to calibrate with each state's regulations. So it is incredibly complex. We have thermal screening for employees as they're coming into the buildings in terms of temperature checks. We have on-site testing available. And so it's been a dramatic shift in the workplace and the setup of the workplace. And it's going to continue to change as it's not a one-size-fits-all. So as states come up with new guidelines or change seating requirements, for example, in the state of Nevada, when we opened, our restaurants, dining facilities that opened included bars. And then subsequently, we ended up having to shut down certain types of bar service. We couldn't have people seated at bar counters. And so you're working in a very real-time way. Swimming pools, another example. We didn't realize or anticipate the high demand by our guests for access to the swimming pools and had to very quickly deploy technology to set up virtual queuing for pool access. These were things that we didn't have in place before. And so you've got to adapt real time, I think, is how I'd sort of conclude this topic.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. Beginning to get some questions in now from the audience, which is great. And thank you for that. And please keep them coming. And I'll throw a couple in now. And one relates back to some of the introductory framework I gave earlier on in terms of this need to get greater inclusion in the technology revolution, the work revolution that's going on, the future of work. And the fear, I think, in this question is that the pandemic is making the splits between the digital haves, the digital have-nots, potentially even greater, from education up through into the discussion we were just having about people who can work remotely and perhaps people who can't. How can we balance that? How can we make sure that this sort of K-shaped recovery that people are talking about doesn't really get hold? What are you seeing? What are you thinking? What are you hearing? What are you doing, again, individually, corporately, to try and make sure that we don't look back at this period and it's a period that it exacerbated, worsened inequality rather than reduced that? Maria?
So I was thinking the new normal is deceptive, right? And for the year ahead, or who knows how long, right? It's gonna be a little bit of more to come. And we are gonna go about it, you know, a little bit at one space at a time. Shall we go back to the old ways? I think the answer is no, because it has been proven. I spoke with a couple of clients recently that said, no, we don't need to go back to the office. But another client that is in a very critical position said, I am suffering a little bit for the collaboration aspects when I need to put people in a room and we have all the technology. So what I think is going to happen is what makes sense for the product and industry and services that you provide, like Joyty was describing, right? It is essential that they are in that building. But for others like us providing professional services, and we have been able to hold more through that digital channel. And for Jim that, needs to get a product out there, and that product is manufactured in a place where people need to do it. So my personal and professional opinion is it depends on the industry, but I don't think it's going to ever be back to what it was. And I want to add one more thing, that I believe that the humanization of this and what employees are going to demand and what they're going to need versus the business productivity and performance are going to kind of create a new ecosystem that will be kind of the post-pandemic operating model. And, I will leave you with that.
Yeah. I mean, you touched on this.
If I can add something, Ben, on that one, I think it's interesting because you talk about people that might feel left out in what we're going to face. What's interesting and a dynamic to think about is there's been a dynamic of greater equality of voice. So if you think about the traditional office setup, not everyone has that office setup, but you have or bigger cubes, you have the analyst that's in smaller cubes, etc. You go to meetings that are live. The most important person usually sits in an area that everyone can see them. The more junior people sit in the back rows or sit behind, don't say anything. When you go on Zoom, it's all the same. We all have the same box. And so I found people are talking a lot more and interacting more and collaborating more, and because everyone's bouncing across the screen. So there's not one single person everyone's looking at. So in many ways, I believe from what I've seen, it's fostered greater collaboration and insight and this ability to take off the veil of hierarchy in my view. And honestly, it's like this is why I wear a t-shirt every day. I haven't worn a collared shirt in 6 months now. So and I do that because it's like we're in an environment where we're all going to be at home. So I think there's a good. I try to take the positive out of this is that we've created a bit more equality, hopefully, for people to have a bigger voice that usually have not been, and you lead to better ideas.
I said to my wife yesterday, in fact, I'm dreading putting pants back on. I haven't worn them for 6 months either. Joyty, you touched on this a little bit in some of your comments earlier on the work you're doing on the philanthropic side, but say a little bit more about that in response to this sort of question. How can we use this as a moment to shrink inequality rather than accentuate it, do you think?
Yeah, and actually, if I can also tag on to that, a question that John raised in the chat, which was also around equality and supporting small businesses and local communities. I think it's absolutely essential that corporations and organizations continue to do whatever they can and ramp up support at the local community level, and particularly for small businesses who really depend on orders and engagement with companies like ourselves. I mean, we've been very focused on reopening safely, and then bringing back our guests and customers and ramping up our business. And in that process, then you bring back your suppliers, your producers, your distributors, and the whole ecosystem then begins. And I think it's really important to have that lens. From a philanthropy perspective, we are committed to continuing our support for communities at at national, regional, and local levels. We have had a big emphasis around food and feeding programs. I'm so proud of our staff and our chefs. Just a quick anecdote here: in the middle of April, we had our chefs from 2 of our properties here in Las Vegas, the Aria Hotel and the Bellagio, come into the kitchens. And for 2 weeks, for 7 days consecutively, through the end of April, they cooked 1,000 hot meals a day in our kitchens. And in partnership with Catholic Charities, essentially helped load up trucks. And those meals were distributed on a daily basis to people in the community that needed it. And food insecurity has been really, I think, one of the most tragic impacts and results of the pandemic. And we were determined to do everything we can to help on that front. And that's just one example of how we've given back to the community. So it's not just dollars and cents, but it's using your resources, using your facilities, using your labor in a safe way, and your colleagues and volunteering to help others at a time like this.
That's terrific, thank you. For folks who are dialing in, listening, please do feel free to throw in a question or two into the Q&A panel. We've got about 8 minutes to go. Time flies when you're having fun. Here's a question for the panelists, perhaps on a personal level. What's the sort of biggest surprise? What's the biggest, wow, I wasn't expecting this in this 7-8 month period that you've gone through? What's kind of, what's taking you back a little bit? Maria?
I'm laughing because I'm a true consultant, which I was on planes every week, and it was kind of a pride and balanced family. And suddenly I found myself at home and enjoying it and having dinner every night at home. And I never was able to say that I had hobbies. Now I have 2 hobbies, biking and photography. I have, I can talk about it. So for me personally, this has been a gift to have had the opportunity to do an introspect. This is just a very personal point of view that I even never talked about my personal life in the old world. It was all business, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm really, waking up to feel such a much better person. And I'm reaching out 2 to 3 people probably a week that I know might be in need, that have a business that was closed down, that has a family that is sick. And so I'm paying it forward on my own way, even from the confinement of my home. And it's giving me a great sense of humanity. So for me, it has been a plus, and plus being able to do my job, have chief executive levels meetings, and still continue to run the business. So I feel very fortunate, but I do know out there is a very different experience for other people. So
thank you. Jim, how about you? The biggest sort of surprise in this whole process, this period?
Probably similarly, just that I've been able to do my work personally, probably if not anything more effectively, actually, because sadly enough, I can jam more meetings into my calendar on Zoom than I could in an office setting. So I actually can get a lot more work done, a lot more talking to a lot more people. But yeah, the personal benefit of just being at home with my kids. My youngest is I have 2 boys who I love to death, but my youngest is a daughter. She's turning 9, so she's at that great age, and I realized, honestly, like I missed a lot. I was home, but I was coming home late. I was leaving early, and so it's small little things. You're just spending more time with your kids and enjoying. I'm just enjoying that. That's my hobby, I guess, in many ways. But part of and there's a good question I see on there about Zoom fatigue. I think I took a vacation 2 weeks ago, and I didn't go anywhere. I just sat at home. I just didn't go on Zoom. I just basically disconnected from getting meetings, and I think that is a big issue that everyone's facing is how much is too much? How do we calm it down? How do we dial it back? And
yes,
I think there'll be a correction period.
Joyty, how about you? What's the biggest surprise for you in this period?
I think for me, it's the way people have come together, and particularly my team and my colleagues. We've tragically had loss of life at MGM as a result of COVID. We've lost colleagues. We've had colleagues who've lost family members. So this is very real for us. But the way my team have come together, I mean, for weeks on end, we were working 7 days a week. We were on calls, meetings, and it was all about how can we help others? What can we do? They are my family. I moved to Las Vegas in November for this position, and literally arrived with a couple of boxes of clothes and knowing nobody other than my MGM colleagues. And so in this process, they've become my family, and sort of the team that I lean on, and I'm very grateful to each and every one of them. And that's, I think, been one of the wonderful surprises for me is how we connected and bonded. And
that's quite a life experience to move to a totally different place and then find yourself locked down a few months after that. It's pretty incredible. Yeah. Well, look, we're almost out of time, guys. Why don't we just go around the horn one more time and just almost a sort of closing statement. Again, I think frames within that whole tenor of this conversation that there is an opportunity to kind of not just go back to business as usual, not go back to the old world, but to try and build a better world. What would you all say as sort of closing statements in that intention? What are you going to do differently? What are your organizations thinking about doing differently to try and build this better world that we clearly all want? Maria?
I will say that we are emerging stronger. We will survive this. I want to just leave that message of positivism that, you know, regardless of the sorrow that we are witnessing, we as humanity, technology, all of it combined, capitalism, globalization, we are going to be stronger. That's my...
Yeah, great. Jim?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to what I said at the beginning. I think, you know, in these types of trials and tribulation, all this change is just, you know, leaning in, learning, being, no matter what age or level of technology, there's opportunities to learn. Like Maria said, she picked up 2 new hobbies. Like, it doesn't need to be work related, but this is a great opportunity for us to transform and challenge ourselves. And those that lean in more, whether it's companies or people, I think come out stronger. And I think this is, you know, this is a pivotal moment for everybody, and everyone's going to remember this moment this year, and hopefully not too much longer, but everyone's going to remember and the pivotal impact it's had on everybody. So leaning and being agile, being flexible through this is, to me, if I was going to give any advice, that would be keeping that top of mind.
Joyty?
yeah, I completely agree with the sentiments expressed by Maria and Jim. At MGM, we have a philosophy which is centered around embracing humanity and protecting the planet. And I can't think of a time in our lifetimes and around the world where this has more resonance and such significance and poignancy. And so I think for us, and how I think about it is, what can I do to embrace humanity at a deeper, more profound level and to protect our planet at an even greater level? And so that's the commitment that we hope will endure and that we take forward.
Yeah, great. Well, look, guys, thanks so much to all of you. It's been terrific chatting with you all and sharing thoughts in this, as you say, all of you say, a very strange time, very difficult time, but very important time. And thank you to everybody that's dialed in and taken the time to listen. We appreciate that. And please, if this has been interesting and you'd like more, be aware of the other sessions that I mentioned earlier on that are happening next Wednesday and the following Wednesday. Next Wednesday's session is on the tools and aesthetics of work. And then the third session in 2 weeks' time is on finding solutions for the challenges we're all still going with. So with that, I'll say thank you, goodbye, good luck, and I look forward to chatting again another time. And thanks again to John Wang. Thank you.
Thank you.
You.